What happens when two powerhouse personalities clash on live television over artistic integrity versus commercial success? Today we're diving into the explosive moment when legendary Broadway star Stephanie Mills walked off Sherri Shepherd's talk show after a conversation about the entertainment industry turned into a full-blown verbal battleground. This isn't just another celebrity disagreement. This is about respect, legacy, and the price of staying true to your craft in an industry that constantly demands compromise. If you want to see more breakdowns of these intense celebrity moments, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below with your thoughts on who was right in this situation. The interview started innocently enough. Sherri Shepherd welcomed Stephanie Mills to the show with her usual warm energy, praising the Tony Award-winning actress for her incredible career spanning decades of theater, music, and television. Mills, known for her powerhouse voice and her iconic role as Dorothy in The Wiz on Broadway, settled into the guest chair with the poise of someone who had been in the spotlight for over 40 years. "Stephanie, it's such an honor to have you here today," Sherri began, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "Your voice has literally moved mountains, and your performances have touched so many lives. I have to ask, what keeps you going after all these years in such a demanding industry?" Mills smiled warmly, her hands folded gracefully in her lap. "Thank you for having me, Sherri. You know, it's really about the love of the craft. When I step on that stage, whether it's Broadway or a concert hall, I'm not thinking about anything else except connecting with the audience and telling the story through song. That connection, that raw emotional exchange between performer and audience, that's what feeds my soul." "That's beautiful," Sherri responded, nodding enthusiastically. "And speaking of connecting with audiences, I noticed you've been pretty selective about your recent projects. There have been some amazing opportunities in television and film, some really big budget productions, but you've turned down quite a few. Can you talk about that decision-making process?" The question seemed harmless enough, but there was something in Sherri's tone that suggested she was building toward a larger point. Mills shifted slightly in her chair, her expression becoming more measured. "Well, Sherri, at this stage of my career, I'm not interested in just taking any role that comes my way. I've earned the right to be choosy. When you've put in the work that I have, when you've proven yourself time and again, you don't just say yes to everything because the money is good or because it will keep your name in the headlines." "I understand that completely," Sherri said, though her follow-up suggested otherwise. "But don't you think there's something to be said for staying relevant? The entertainment landscape has changed so much, especially with social media and streaming platforms. Sometimes taking those commercial projects, even if they're not your first choice artistically, can introduce you to new audiences and keep your career momentum going." Mills raised an eyebrow, sensing the direction the conversation was heading. "Momentum? Sherri, I've been maintaining momentum for 4 decades. My career isn't built on chasing trends or compromising my artistic vision for the sake of staying quote-unquote relevant. Real artists understand that relevance comes from authenticity, not from desperately grabbing at every opportunity that presents itself." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop a few degrees. Sherri's smile became more forced, and she leaned forward slightly, her media-trained instincts kicking in to navigate what was clearly becoming a more contentious exchange. "I'm not suggesting you should compromise your artistic vision," Sherri said carefully. "I'm just saying that the business side of entertainment is important too. Look at someone like Beyoncé. She's managed to maintain her artistic integrity while also being incredibly commercially successful. She's adapted to new platforms, collaborated with younger artists, and found ways to reach new audiences without sacrificing who she is as an artist." Mills's posture stiffened visibly. The comparison to Beyoncé, while meant as a compliment, seemed to strike a nerve. "Sherri, with all due respect, you're comparing apples to oranges. Beyoncé is a pop star who built her career in the digital age. I'm a theater actress who earned her stripes on Broadway when that actually meant something. When you had to have real vocal training and stage presence, not just a pretty face and a social media following." "Whoa, hold on," Sherri interjected, her own tone becoming more defensive. "I think you're being a little unfair to contemporary artists. The industry has evolved. but that doesn't mean today's performers are less talented or less deserving of respect. And I have to say, your attitude seems a little elitist. Elitist? Mills repeated, her voice rising slightly. Sherri, there's nothing elitist about having standards. There's nothing elitist about believing that talent should be the primary factor in success. Not how many followers you have on Instagram, or whether you're willing to participate in manufactured. Stephanie, please sit back down, Sherri said, her voice taking on a more authoritative tone. I wasn't lecturing you. I was just trying to have a conversation about the realities of today's entertainment industry. You're putting words in my mouth and frankly, you're being a little dramatic. The word dramatic hit Mills like a slap across the face. Her eyes flashed with indignation as she remained standing, her hands now placed firmly on her hips. Dramatic? Did you just call me dramatic for having standards and principles? This is exactly what I'm talking about. The moment someone refuses to play along with the dumbing down of entertainment, they get labeled as difficult or dramatic. That's not what I said, Sherri replied, though her tone suggested she was becoming increasingly frustrated with her guest's reaction. I said you're being dramatic right now, in this moment, by standing up and making a big production out of a simple conversation about career strategy. A big production? Mills laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sherri, my entire career has been about big productions. I've commanded stages that you could never even dream of performing on. I've brought audiences to their feet with nothing but my voice and my presence. So yes, when I have something important to say, it might seem like a big production to someone who's used to celebrity gossip and manufactured controversy. The studio audience was captivated, some leaning forward in their seats, others exchanging glances with their neighbors. This wasn't the typical lighthearted celebrity interview they had expected when they got their tickets to the show. Sherri took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain her composure and professional demeanor. Stephanie, I understand that you're passionate about your craft and I respect that. But you're being incredibly condescending right now. I've worked in this industry too, I've paid my dues, and I don't appreciate you suggesting that what I do doesn't have value or that I don't understand real entertainment. Then maybe you should start acting like you understand it. Mills shot back without hesitation. Instead of pushing this narrative that artists need to lower their standards and chase after audiences who don't appreciate quality, maybe you should be using your platform to educate people about what real talent looks like. Lower their standards? Sherri's voice was rising now, her professional mask beginning to slip. Who are you to decide what constitutes lowering standards? Just because something is popular or commercially successful doesn't automatically make it inferior. And just because you've had a successful career doesn't give you the right to look down on other artists or other forms of entertainment. Mills moved closer to Sherri's desk, her presence commanding the entire studio's attention. I have every right to speak about what I've observed in this industry over 4 decades. I've watched talent get pushed aside for marketability. I've seen real artists struggle while people with half the skill get handed opportunities because they fit some demographic or they're willing to participate in manufactured drama. And what exactly are you implying about me? Sherri asked, her jaw set tight. Are you saying I don't deserve my success? Are you saying I'm not talented enough to be sitting in this chair? I'm saying that this conversation is a perfect example of what's wrong with entertainment today, Mills replied, her voice steady but intense. Instead of celebrating excellence and artistic achievement, we're having a debate about whether standards matter. Instead of discussing the craft, we're talking about social media followers and staying relevant. Sherri stood up from behind her desk, matching Mills's energy. You know what, Stephanie? I think you're living in the past. The industry has evolved, and maybe instead of criticizing how things are done now, you should try to understand why these changes have happened. Maybe there are good reasons why entertainment has become more accessible and more diverse. Accessible and diverse are wonderful things, Mills conceded, though her tone suggested she had more to say, but not at the expense of quality, and not by diminishing the achievements of those who came before. You want to talk about diversity? I was breaking barriers when you were still figuring out what you wanted to do with your life. I was representing for artists of color on Broadway when that was far from guaranteed. And I respect that, Sherri said firmly, but using your pioneering status as a weapon to dismiss contemporary artists and contemporary forms of entertainment is not the legacy move you think it is. It makes you sound bitter and out of touch. The word bitter hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Mill's expression shifted from indignation to something approaching fury. Bitter? You think I'm bitter because I refuse to pretend that talent doesn't matter anymore? You think I'm out of touch because I believe that artistry should be about more than generating clicks and going viral? The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Sherri found her voice again. When she spoke, her words came out measured and cold, each syllable delivered with surgical precision. You know what, Stephanie? I've been trying to be respectful here, but you've made it clear that respect isn't something you're interested in giving or receiving. So let me be crystal clear about something. This is my show, this is my stage, and you don't get to come into my house and disrespect what I've built. Mills crossed her arms, her stance unwavering. Your house? Sherri, this is a television studio owned by a network, furnished with money from advertisers, and filled with an audience that came here for entertainment. You're an employee, just like I am when I'm performing. The difference is, I remember that. I remember that too, Sherri fired back, her professional composure completely abandoned now. But I also remember that I worked my way up from stand-up comedy clubs to sitcoms to hosting major network shows. I didn't have the luxury of starting my career when there were fewer people competing for the same opportunities. I had to fight for every single thing I achieved, and I did it without looking down on other people's paths to success. Fewer opportunities? Mill's voice rose again, incredulous. Are you seriously suggesting that it was easier for a black woman to make it on Broadway in the 1970s and 80s than it is for someone to get a talk show today? Are you really that disconnected from the history of this industry? I'm not talking about racial barriers, Sherri clarified, though her tone remained heated. I'm talking about the fact that you act like your generation of performers were somehow more deserving or more talented than people working today. You act like paying dues means something different now. Like the struggles contemporary artists face don't count because they happen on different stages. Mills laughed again, that same bitter sound from earlier. Contemporary struggles? Sherri, do you know what struggle looks like? Struggle is doing 8 shows a week while dealing with racist reviews that question whether you belong on that stage. Struggle is being told you're too black for mainstream audiences and too mainstream for black audiences. Struggle is proving yourself over and over again because people assume your success was handed to you or that you're just a flavor of the month. And you think those struggles don't exist anymore? Sherri challenged. You think racism disappeared? You think people don't still have to prove themselves? The only difference is now there are more platforms and more opportunities, but that also means more competition and more ways for people to tear you down. Social media isn't just about followers. It's also about dealing with thousands of people criticizing everything you do every single day. At least you have those followers to begin with, Mills retorted. At least people are paying attention to what you're doing. Do you know how many incredibly talented theater actors can't get anyone to notice their work because everyone is too busy watching reality shows and viral videos? Do you know how many artists have given up because they can't compete with manufactured personalities and scripted authenticity? Manufactured personalities? Sherri's eyes flashed dangerously. Are you calling me manufactured? Are you saying my personality isn't real? Mills paused, seeming to realize she had pushed into territory that might be difficult to back away from. But instead of softening her approach, she doubled down. I'm saying that the entertainment industry rewards certain types of personalities over others, and authenticity isn't always the trait that gets rewarded. I'm saying that sometimes the people who get platforms are chosen more for their willingness to play a role than for their ability to contribute something meaningful. Wow, Sherri said, shaking her head slowly. You really think you're better than everyone else, don't you? You really believe that your way of entertaining people is somehow more noble or more important than what anyone else does. I believe that some forms of entertainment challenge people to grow and think and feel deeply, while others just help them pass time, Mills replied without hesitation. I believe that art should aspire to something higher than just giving people what they already expect. And I believe that art should be accessible to everyone, not just to people who can afford Broadway tickets, or who went to the right schools, or who understand all the cultural references, Sherri shot back. I believe that making people laugh or helping them feel less alone or giving them a break from their problems is just as valuable as making them think deep thoughts about the human condition. Mills tilted her head, studying Sherri with newfound interest. Is that what you think you do? Help people feel less alone? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you spend most of your time talking about celebrity gossip and manufactured controversies. The accusation hit its target perfectly. Sherri's face went through a series of expressions, from hurt to anger to something approaching rage. How dare you? How dare you reduce what I do to gossip and controversy? I talk to people every day who tell me that this show helped them through difficult times, that seeing someone who looked... The two women stared at each other across the desk, both breathing heavily from the intensity of their exchange. The studio lights seemed brighter somehow, casting sharp shadows that made their facial expressions appear even more dramatic. Mills was the first to break the silence, but when she spoke, her voice carried a finality that everyone in the room could feel. You know what, Sherri? I think we've both made our positions very clear. You believe that entertainment should be about giving people what they want, and I believe it should be about showing them what they didn't know they needed. You think success is measured by ratings and social media engagement, and I think it's measured by artistic impact and cultural significance. That's right, Sherri agreed, though her tone suggested this wasn't heading toward reconciliation. And I also think that real success includes treating people with respect, which seems to be something you've forgotten how to do. Mills nodded slowly, as if she were processing this accusation carefully. Respect is earned, Sherri. It's not something you get automatically because you have a television show or because you can make people laugh. Respect comes from dedication to your craft, from consistency, from refusing to compromise your standards even when it would be easier to just go along with whatever trend is popular at the moment. And there it is again, Sherri said, throwing her hands up in exasperation. That condescending attitude that suggests anyone who found success in a different way than you did must have compromised their standards. That arrogant assumption that your path was somehow more noble or more difficult than everyone else's. It's not arrogant if it's true, Mills replied matter-of-factly. And the truth is, some paths require more sacrifice, more training, more dedication than others. Some forms of success are harder to achieve and more meaningful once you have them. That's not my opinion, that's just reality. Sherri stood up straighter, her jaw set with determination. You want to talk about reality? Here's some reality for you. You're sitting on my show, in front of my audience, insulting my career and my choices. You're using my platform to promote your own sense of superiority, while simultaneously dismissing everything I've worked to build. That's not integrity, Stephanie. That's just disrespect. Your platform? Mills repeated, her eyebrows raised. This platform exists because networks need content to sell advertising. You're not doing anyone any favors by hosting this show, you're doing a job. And if you can't handle having guests who challenge your worldview, or who refuse to just smile and promote their latest project, maybe you're in the wrong line of work. The comment hit Sherri like a physical blow. Her face flushed deeper, and when she responded, her voice was shaking with barely controlled fury. Maybe I'm in the wrong line of work? Are you kidding me? I've been successfully entertaining audiences for decades. I've built a career that's allowed me to support my family, employed dozens of people, and give back to my community. But because I don't share your particular brand of artistic snobbery, you think I don't deserve what I've achieved? I think you've achieved exactly what you set out to achieve, Mills said calmly. Commercial success, mainstream appeal, financial security. Those are all valid goals. But don't confuse those achievements with artistic excellence. And don't expect me to pretend that all forms of success are equally meaningful or equally difficult to attain. Sherri laughed, but it was a sound filled with disbelief and anger. Equally meaningful? Who made you the judge of what's meaningful? Who gave you the authority to decide whose work matters and whose doesn't? You're one person, Stephanie. One person with one perspective, and your perspective doesn't get to define reality for everyone else. My perspective is informed by 40 years of experience in professional theater, Mills countered. My perspective comes from working with some of the most talented artists of my generation and understanding what real excellence looks like. My perspective is valuable because it's based on actually doing the work at the highest level, not just talking about it on television. Actually doing the work? Sherri's voice cracked slightly. You think hosting a daily talk show isn't work? You think connecting with audiences day after day, week after week, year after year isn't a skill? You think being responsible for the livelihoods of writers and producers and crew members isn't pressure? Just because my work doesn't happen on a Broadway stage doesn't mean it doesn't require talent and dedication. Mills was quiet for a moment, and for the first time during the entire confrontation, she seemed to be considering her words carefully. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer but no less firm. I'm sure your work requires certain skills, Sherri, but the question is whether those skills contribute something lasting to our culture, or whether they just help people pass time between more important things. The studio fell completely silent. Even the cameras seemed to stop humming. Sherri stared at Mills with an expression that was equal parts hurt and fury. And when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Get out!" Mills blinked, apparently surprised by the direct command. "Excuse me?" "I said get out," Sherri repeated, her voice growing stronger. "This interview is over. You can take your artistic superiority and your decades of experience and your Tony Awards and walk right off my stage. I don't have to sit here and listen to you dismiss my life's work as meaningless distraction." Mills stood perfectly still for several